Hello all, welcome to part 14 of the Wireless LAN Security Mega Primer. So finally, we are going to crack web in this video. So we've all heard a lot about web being broken for a very long time and a lot of vulnerabilities being reported. Here is a quick breakdown of the different vulnerabilities and problems various cryptographers found over time in web. And basically the conclusion was that right there in 2001, when basically Borisov had come out with their paper Insecurity of 802.11, that talked about of a lot of interesting things wrong with the protocol itself. I would recommend you read the paper. The first path breaking paper was by FMS, Ferrer Martin Shamir, who had actually talked about the weakness in the KSA of RC4, and they had defined various things as the weak IVs and all of that, which we will talk about in a bit. Then you had a lot of other interesting things which kind of came after that. You had a gentleman named Korek who improved on the technique in kind of decrease the complexity of web crapping. Then you had Andreas Klein, who once again came up with some other modification to increase the correlation between the RC4 key streams and the key, which is what essentially we look at when we try to crack web. Last but not the least, you have the PTW attack, where the number of packets required drastically came down to hardly 60,000 to 90,000 packets. So this was the story, and this is a specific slide I have taken from the presentation I had given at TourCon a long time back for the Cafe Latte attack, and that's why copyright to Airtight, the company I used to work with at that time. Anyway, coming back, web cracking. So there are different attacks which have slightly different logic, and if I kind of want to narrow it down and put it in very simple words, the whole idea behind web cracking is to find what is called a weak IV or weak initialization vector. Now, what is that? Well, cryptographers have found that some of the IVs which we were taking and prepending it to the web key before going ahead and generating the key stream, well, the key stream generated because of these using these specific IVs was revealing some information with some probability about the web key itself. And when you have a large number of these weak IV samples, then it is possible to intelligibly guess the web key with some confidence. And this is what all of these papers and all of these different techniques talk about. Now, couple of interesting things is that these weak IVs, which give out information about the web key, are not uniformly distributed in the entire IV space. Now, when I say IV space, you will remember that the IV is 3 bytes or 24 bits long, which would mean there are 2 to the power 24 possibilities, which is not much if you think about it. And the weak IVs are distributed non-uniformly and are key dependent. That's also something which is very important. To some extent, when you take one weak IV, it may reveal something about one particular key but may not reveal something about some other key. And this is the reason it takes time. Why? Because for any given key, you need to gather enough number of these weak IVs to actually be able to guess the original key with some confidence. So I'll leave it at that. If you want, you can read the papers. There are 7 or 8 of them. And frankly, it's more of a mathematical exercise than of anything to do with security per se. But I would encourage you to at least have a look at them. If you really want to know well how all of this is implemented, a good place would be the Aircrack NG source code itself, right? Very quickly, I'll just show you where you can do a little bit of reading in the source code. So I'm in here and I'll quickly go to security tube. And what I've done is I've downloaded the latest version of Aircrack NG. Now, I don't know, people who are developers may be aware of tools called CTags and CScopes, but these are very useful tools when you want to browse a large code distribution. So what I found is ctags is installed by default on Backtrack, but cscope is not. So you could very quickly just do a simple apt-get install cscope, right? I've already installed it on mine, and hence there should not be any issues right now, but this is something you would require. The next thing we would do is find all the C and .c as well as .h files, right? This command would give you that. What we will do is we will store this in a file called cscope.files, and now we'll use this utility called ctags to actually create the tags for all the files mentioned in cscope.files. And then we run cscope to go ahead and index all of these files. Now I cannot go through a full primer of both these utilities. Have a look. What we are really interested in is basically the main function in aircrack-ng. So this is where it actually starts. Quickly take you to the place where you can actually look at part of the cracking process. I had modified this code when I was giving my DEF CON talk and TourCon talk. So it's been quite some time since I revisited this code. So there are a lot of interesting functions and everything here which you can have a look at later. I may take up a video of actually browsing through some of this code at a later stage. Right, so there's one interesting function which is called crack web thread, right? So this is a parallel thread running to crack web, and this is where you can actually figure out how the IVs and all of that are taken, how the scores are computed, the votes are added and whatnot, right? A lot of interesting stuff here, but I would say you would require this typically only if you're actually planning to make some modifications to the source code itself for some enhanced functionality. But it's interesting nevertheless to know how the tool works. Coming back. So cracking web the script kiddie way. The reason I say this is because web cracking probably is one of the most abused attack techniques. I mean, there are millions of videos, millions of blogs just talking about web cracking and using AirCrack and a couple of other tools, AirSnort and whatnot. Anyway, so coming to how it's done, there are two techniques very broadly. One is the passive way, which is basically, well, the traffic is going between the access point and the client. What you are doing is just waiting, sniffing the air, storing all of those encrypted data packets. Now, what is the biggest advantage? You're undetectable. The beauty in wireless is if you're passively just listening to the channel, nobody can know that you exist. Also, with a directional antenna, you can actually be miles away and nobody would even know that you're collecting those packets. Now, as we said in web cracking, what you need is a large number of weak IV packets which are non-uniformly distributed across the IV space. But over a large period of time, you would end up getting many of these weak IVs as you receive more and more data packets, and at some point you will be able to break the key. And hence, in a passive way, after some period of time when you have a large amount of data traffic, you would be able to break the key, and then once the key is cracked, all the packets which you collected over the last 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, everything will be decryptable. Then we come to the active way. Maybe patience is not a virtue. You're okay getting caught, but you're not okay waiting. Just kidding. So in this case, what we really use is replay attacks. So what is a replay attack? Now think about this. You have the client, you have the access point, both of them are communicating and sending encrypted data packets. An attacker can only sniff the air and store those encrypted data packets. He cannot decrypt them currently because he doesn't have the key. However, certain encrypted packets, if the attacker replays them back to the access point, then those packets may force other data packets to be sent in response. And the typical case is ARP packets. Why? Because any network would have hundreds of hosts sending ARP requests and ARP responses at any given time. Now, all the attacker has to do is to sniff one ARP request packet for a legitimate host which is up and running. Then all he has to do is keep replaying that ARP request packet. The host will respond with an ARP response. The access point will push it onto the air with a new IV. We start collecting more and more data packets as we repeat this over and over and over again. Over a large period, we get many of these data packets, run it through AirCrack and crack the key. So let me break this down into 3 steps. Step 1, capture ARP packets. Now we have the authorized client and we have the access point who are communicating, and the attacker is just going ahead and sniffing the medium and capturing these packets. Currently, the attacker has no way of knowing that the encrypted packet is ARP or not. So question number 1, how can you figure out which packet is an ARP packet even though it is encrypted? The answer is simple. ARP packets are fixed size packets and are very small in size. So just by using the size of the entire packet, we can very easily figure out that this is actually an ARP packet, right? Think about it. Question number 2, how do we figure out that a given packet is an ARP request or an ARP response? So answer is very simple. An ARP request packet is a broadcast packet, while an ARP response packet is a unicast packet. And hence, by looking at the destination MAC address in the 802.11 MAC header, we can differentiate between ARP request and ARP response packets. So what does the attacker do? He sniffs the air waiting for these ARP request packets. He gets an ARP request packet, he replaces back into the network and sees if he gets a response from the network or not. If he gets a response, well, he has a winner. He'll just keep on replaying this. So step 2 is, once you get that ARP request packet off the air, the attacker will just keep sending that ARP request packet to the access point, and depending on whom that ARP request packet is destined for, the host or the AP would reply back and ARP response packets would keep coming. The attacker would just repeat the process a couple of 100,000 times, a couple of thousand times actually, and get newer packets with different IVs. At some point, he would have enough packets with enough weak IVs to crack the key, which is step number 3, right? So let's do all of these steps with our access point. Now, the first step is to actually figure out what is up in the air, and what we are interested in is in channel 1, where our pawn.me access point is. This is where it is. So the first thing we are going to do is tell ArrowDump to save these packets. So we have --write, and then let's say online cracking is the prefix, and let's also give the BSS ID so that we don't just start copying packets of other BSS IDs, and then we allow it to kind of work parallelly. Now what I'll do is, in the beginning, let me just connect my client to it. So the client is currently connected to the access point, right? It says connected client. Now what we are going to do is, we want to detect and replay ARP packets. So let's go ahead and use the air replay ng tool, and what we want to use is the ARP replay option, --ARP replay, and along with this we'll have to give a couple of other options. ESSID is easy upon me, and let's start the ARP replay. So currently, if you notice, it says 0 ARP requests have been found. Now what that means is we'll have to simulate some data sending from this client. How do we do that? Well, one simple way which we've learned all the time is actually to go ahead and send a DAuth packet, a broadcast DAuth maybe, just to kind of make it fast and quick, out there for the given BSSID. In this case, we can use the ESSID because there is only one real physical access point there on the Mon0 interface, right? And if you notice, till now we have not got any data packets. So here is the client, and what am I going to do is I'm going to go ahead and now hit enter. Oops. Looks like I made a little mistake. It's --ESSID, right? And now I'm actually going to go ahead and hit enter on this, so that looks like I forgot an option. Okay, it's just -E. Hopefully this time around this is going to work, right? And I don't know, why did I do fake auth? Stupid of me. Making a lot of mistakes just after lunch, so I'm a bit drowsy. What we need to do is basically the DAuth attack, right? Right, and so what we've done is we've sent the broadcast DAuth packets. I hit a Control-C, and if you notice, the client is again connected, and some data packets have been generated. However, interestingly, we have the ARP packets, but we are not able to generate or make the system generate any other data packets. Can you see that? Even though we are seeing there's a lot of traffic going to the access point, this is the access point 25, from some MAC address 93 ending in 93, which is actually the attacker client, which is our little alpha card here. We are not able to make the network generate new packets, and the reason is very simple. Air replay ng actually tells you got a DAuth disassoc packet is the source MAC associated. The problem is air replay ng is using the source MAC address of the attacker, which the access point is rejecting simply because that MAC address is not associated. Now what we could do is we could either forge a fake association, or we could just go ahead and use the MAC address of the client directly, right? So this is the MAC address of the client, which is 60FB42. Can do that using the -F option, 60FB42, and then you have D5E401. So you have D5E401. Right, now you're all set to go, and we are again waiting for our preplay packets. Now let's do the following. Let's send the DAuth once again. So we are going to send the DAuths again to disconnect. Disconnection has happened. I'll allow it to reconnect once again. Reconnected, and voila. If you notice, right now it's actually saying, well, we are successful in sending these tons of packets. If you notice that, right? Probably a couple of hundred packets and which are now getting accepted by the access point. Note that we are also storing these packets locally. So what we need to do parallelly is just start aircrack-ng, which, as all of you know, is the tool of choice. And with aircrack-ng, we just have to mention the name of the pcap file. In our case, it is onlinecracking.cap. And aircrack-ng will parallelly start the cracking attempt, right? And once we have enough number of data packets, and it finds weak IVs and other techniques based on the other attacks like clean, PTW, etc., we should be able to break the key, right? So this is non-deterministic in the sense it may take some time. So we'll just allow a little bit of more packets to get aggregated. So as I said, because the weak IVs and other things are non-uniformly distributed, there is no deterministic way to say that once you have so many packets, you will be able to crack the key immediately. Right? So if you notice, aircrack-ng is actually testing a lot of possibilities based on the algorithmic calculations. And it actually says, well, it's received 17,483 unique initialization vectors till now. And here is how it is doing it. Basically, this is a specific guess, and this is the vote which is being given to that guess based on various calculations. Right? So the beauty is aircrack-ng will refresh the calculation and kind of start off once it receives more initialization vectors automatically. So the only thing we have to guarantee is that newer packets are getting continuously generated using our replay attack. Awesome, we are done. And I think practically within 7 minutes, with all the little mistakes which I did on the way, we were able to actually crack the web key. So I think, give or take, within 5 minutes, you can crack a web key. Now I have taken the 40-bit web key. I don't think the 104-bit is any different. Try it out yourself, set the web key, try out this process. And if you haven't done it even once yet, you'll feel a very gratifying kind of a feeling once you're able to crack the key yourself, right? Okay, so coming back. So that's all I had in mind for this video. This is basic web cracking. In the next video, we will start looking at a couple of other interesting attacks which can be done against web networks. So as always, please leave your comments behind. I really like reading them, and that kind of keeps me going all the time. And looking forward to see you in the next video.